Thank you for joining Resilient Cyber. My name is Chris Hughes. Today I'm joined by Steve Carter. Steve, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to chat. You've been on the show before. We've dove into, a lot of things around vulnerability management, some of the things you were up to with Nucleus security, but it's been a while. Things have, you've been busy. Things have changed in the ecosystem the past, I think it's at least been a year. So for folks that don't know you, don't know the Nucleus team, can you tell us a bit about yourself and the company?
Yeah. Well, I hate talking about myself, but I do like talking about Nucleus. So yeah, really quick. I spent most of my career working for defense contractors, helping federal agencies build and scale vulnerability management programs. And I started my own defense contracting business in 2015, where I basically did that same thing, but for myself. And that's actually where we started to build the Nucleus platform. And in 2019, we decided that Nucleus should be its own company. So I left that defense contracting company that I helped to start in order to start Nucleus. And I've been in the CEO role for the last 5 years since the beginning, doing all the CEO things, plus anything and everything that other folks in the business don't want to do, as I'm sure you're used to, Chris.
Yeah, definitely. So I am going to take us a bit of a sidebar. I didn't intend on asking this, but we often hear don't mix services and product, right? And but the dream for many folks, including probably me at some point, is to take a services business, that the intimacy with the customer, the problems, the pain points, and turning into some kind of product that is needed because you're seeing it firsthand. You're seeing the gap. Can you tell us what made you take that leap and how that process was of going from services focused work to trying to build a product company? I'd be curious to hear a little bit on that.
Yeah, to be quite honest, it was mainly that decision was mainly driven by some advisors that we had, advisors to the company that had kind of been there and done that and tried to launch products within a services company. And I mean, the truth is, now having started, both of those types of businesses, they are just night and day. And I can't even imagine a world where we run Nucleus as well as we do inside of a services company, just because they're so radically different. But that was really, it was just some strong advice from a few different people that I knew and that I trusted. And that's what we decided to do. Originally, we were going down that path, though, of we were building Nucleus since 2016 inside of that defense contracting business. And we were going down that path. And several folks said, when it started to really get serious and we started to get some real traction there, they said, you should really consider it. So that's what we did.
Very cool. Yeah, it sounds like you made a clean break and kind of split it up to be able to focus on the product and didn't keep the two mixed indefinitely, which seems like a smart move based on how things are playing out. Yeah. So, given your background, you talked about being a defense contractor. You obviously have experience in the federal landscape, the defense landscape. You all recently achieved, the FedRAMP authorization. For folks not familiar with that, FedRAMP is essentially the federal cloud marketplace, for cloud service offerings in the federal government. Technically, all, cloud-based software should have a FedRAMP authorization for agencies to use it. Agencies definitely seek out, that FedRAMP designation when they're looking to buy or procure some kind of cloud service. And it can really be a competitive differentiator for companies too, to have that plus credibility of they have done their due diligence around, fundamental security things and compliance and so on. Can you tell us a little bit about, what made you all pursue FedRAMP and then how that experience was and now that you're on the other end of that?
Yeah. And I probably should back up just high level, tell folks about Nucleus that aren't familiar with it. Basically, at Nucleus, we're kind of a single source of truth for every vulnerability and every security weakness that exists in the organization, every technical vulnerability and security weakness, I should say. And one component of Nucleus is a data fabric that basically consolidates all of those findings from vulnerability scanners, from ASPM, CSPM, OT scanners, you name it, and then contextualizes all that data with threat and vulnerability intelligence and business context. And then we also have the second part of our platform, which is an automation framework that automates all those mundane, repetitive, time-consuming tasks related to vulnerability management. And there are a ton of them. So that's kind of high level what Nucleus is, what we do. As far as FedRAMP goes, that was a scenario. That was a situation where we had sold Nucleus, like our first Nucleus license, to our first Nucleus customer, which happened to be the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and it was and they offered to sponsor us basically. And at the time, we didn't know a ton about FedRAMP, but one thing we did know that it was really hard for smaller companies to get sponsorship, because we knew of even larger companies that had been waiting and looking for sponsorship for a long time. So we looked at it. We knew it was going to be expensive and a long road, but at the same time, we knew it was an opportunity that we really couldn't turn down. So we pulled the trigger on that. And then let's see, it's been a long road. Happy to dive into it. It's going to be probably like turn into a therapy session for me though, if we're not careful. So
yeah, no, I mean, so it sounds like you had a great opportunity to get the sponsorship. For folks aren't aware, FedRAMP has this kind of chicken and egg scenario where you essentially need the FedRAMP authorization to be used by federal customers, but you need a federal sponsor to get the the FedRAMP authorization. So it's a really weird chicken and egg scenario that, honestly, the FedRAMP program is well aware of, and it's something that they might address, in the future here as part of their modernization efforts. But so you went through the process. It sounds like it was, it took quite a while. It was, cumbersome and complex as often we hear. Coming out of that now, what are some aspirations or like goals you guys have? Not you're on the other side of that. You're probably, knowing my understanding of the federal marketplace and the FedRAMP landscape, likely one of, if not the only kind of, product vendor that does exactly what you guys do that may have this designation. What are your goals and objectives here, and knowing the federal landscape and the defense community in terms of their pain points around vulnerability management and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll say that, we got the authorization about 3 months ago. It was February 29th. I remember it because it was leap day, leap year. And if you were watching our business and Slack or in Zoom, you would have thought that Nucleus literally like landed a rocket on the moon or something. I mean, and we probably could have for about the same cost as FedRAMP authorization, but there's never been a moment in the business where there was more excitement and more celebration, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, because it's a startup and there's awesome stuff going on all the time. And then, of course, the first question we had from the team was, does this mean we don't have to be reassessed for another 4 years since it was a leap year, right? But to your question, let's see, it's FedRAMP unlocks and it unlocks the whole new market for us, right? The whole federal civilian market for us. And it's something that we've been very interested in since we kind of landed our first federal customer, which was kind of by accident. That's a whole nother story. But it is a massive opportunity for us because number one, the federal government and agencies in general haven't really discovered tools like Nucleus yet, right? I mean, we're kind of in a unique category of tools as it is. We're kind of in still this emerging market, trying to, a lot of folks call us, we call ourselves a risk-based vulnerability management platform still. I know that's kind of the old acronym, and there's a lot of other acronyms that we could fit into and that we do fit into and overlap with. But risk-based vulnerability management platforms like Nucleus, number one, there's only a handful of us out there, right? We only compete with and see a couple in the deals we work on, and none of them are in the Fed space so far. And so it's a great opportunity for us. I think probably the biggest challenge we have right now is really just the education of the federal market that a solution like Nucleus even exists, because it hasn't been deployed yet. And I'm sure you've seen this before, where once you get the snowball going, it's great. Once one or two agencies is having some success with it, they talk, and other agencies are paying attention, but we're just now in the very early stages. So that's what we're hoping to do there is we're be the first to market and kind of set the precedent. And because it is something that every agency needs, just like every large enterprise, every mid-sized enterprise needs a solution like Nucleus. You've got all these different tools that are identifying vulnerabilities in these big complex teams. So
yeah, absolutely. So I think the terminology, risk-based vulnerability management, I think it'll resonate well with the federal and defense community, myself personally, because so much of what they do is oriented around, similar terminology like risk management framework or, things like that, or CSF and so on. So they orient around that term a lot, and ultimately they use what's called authorizing officials to kind of accept risk for programs and systems, and for federal data and so on. So I think it'll resonate well with that community, as well as like the government contracting community or software providers working with the federal government via things like FedRAMP and other defense industrial base, et cetera. So I think it'll resonate well with them. When you look at this market, the federal defense market, and given your background as a defense contractor too, what are some of the common pain points you saw or still see when it comes to doing vulnerability management that you think need to be disrupted or addressed?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that honestly, the vast majority of the challenges that we see in federal agencies really aren't very different from most of the ones that we see in the private sector. Every federal agency that we've worked with so far is kind of a snowflake, in the same way that every Fortune 500 or Global 2000 organization is a snowflake to a degree. And some are great, some are kind of disasters. When I think about what's unique relating to federal agencies and vulnerability management, one thing that comes to mind, which again, I'm sure you've seen a lot of as well and are aware of, is just the oversight that's involved, right? Because most of these agencies have tens, hundreds of individual systems within them that are all built, all secured and maintained by different teams. And in the private sector, I guess the best analogy is kind of like a large organization that's acquired a bunch of other companies and inherited a bunch of different technologies and teams and processes they don't fully control yet. You might have some top level corporate policies and controls pushed down, but these are by and large sub-organizations within a much larger organization. And so from a vuln management perspective, it can be really difficult to monitor those closely, and it can be more difficult to get them to comply with whatever policies you've set once they are operational, because they don't really work for you directly. You don't have that level of control. So that's one thing that's really unique and different that we see and that we're solving for. Another is just access control requirements. Lots of agencies have some really interesting access control use cases that we've never seen or been asked for by the private sector. So that's you see that a lot, especially on the DoD side and the IC side as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can definitely attest to that, especially given the push for like the cybersecurity executive order, the federal zero trust strategy. There's a big focus on least permissive access control, granular permissions, and so on. So that's definitely a key thing to call out. Going a bit broader, this is something you and I joked about offline before we went live here. Is it seems like vulnerability management, which is about as old as literally the field of cybersecurity entirely, or information security, again, is now like this hot thing. Everyone's talking about vulnerability management. It was a hot topic at RSA conference. Startups focused on it. You guys focused on it. Obviously, you just had a recent, relatively recent Series B raise round. So there's investment interest in this space. Why do you think vulnerability management is like getting this attention that it is? Given that it has been around for so long, but obviously a lot has changed. It's different cloud microservices, Lambda, et cetera. Like, there's just so containerization, Kubernetes, et cetera. Like there's so much complexity added to the space now too.
Yeah. So couple questions in there. I think you answered, you did a good job of answering one of them. But yeah, to start with, I think if you look at all the latest research on root cause of breaches in the last few years, everything is pointing to vulnerability exploitation these days. Like the latest, this is like report season, right? So you've got MTrends from Mandiant that came out. You've got Unit 42 did their IR report. Obviously the Verizon DBIR. All of those things are pointing to vulnerability exploitation as the number one initial attack vector for breaches and compromises. I think the DBIR probably showed it. I think it showed it as number 2, but it showed a 3x increase from last year. But I think the point is still valid that attackers have just adapted as they do and are focused more on where they can have the most success with the least amount of effort. And it was phishing and credential reuse for, I don't know, a decade or more probably. And so for a lot of years, I think security programs they budgeted for and planned for, defenses against those threats. And meanwhile, there was little to no money being invested in modernizing vulnerability management programs. I think money was being invested in tools, right? You have to have, a tool to scan your code and everything else. But from an enterprise perspective, there weren't many efforts to modernize the overall program. And so in most organizations, you continue to see, to your point, right, cloud adoption grow. You saw open source adoption grow, custom software, more and more custom software, and all that just has broken most of the legacy vulnerability management systems and processes. And so I think attackers just kind of saw this as an opportunity and are taking advantage of the opportunity. And the fact that most organizations are just in catch-up mode, right? They're starting to just now adapt to this new world where how well they manage vulnerabilities is really going to be the biggest determining factor as to whether or not they get breached. So it's just a really interesting dynamic and exciting.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I put a link in the show here is, the DBIR, they dubbed it, I think it was in one of their videos or the document itself, the latest report, where it said the DBIR is entering its vulnerability era, which is like, oh, wow, if you're in the vulnerability management space, like hearing that kind of catchphrase is pretty cool. And then, like you said, M-Trend's report, I think it showed like, exploits are now like 30% of the initial attack vector that lead to data breaches or incidents. So we're seeing this trend like everywhere, and then organizations are simply buried in like massive vulnerability backlogs that they cannot catch up on or they struggle to prioritize. So there's a lot of factors contributing to it, like you talked about here. Given that and seeing the interest of not just you all but other organizations or product companies, both like the longstanding vulnerability leaders in the ecosystem, but also some of the startups and such. What do you think differentiates Nucleus Security? What do you guys really specialize in, or kind of hang your hat on from a product perspective of what makes you different or better?
I appreciate the question, and this space has really changed, and quite honestly, it's become kind of confusing because you were at RSA, right? As you mentioned, most security vendors have worked vulnerability management into their data sheets and their marketing and everything else. And then of course it is kind of acronym soup out there now with ASPM, CSPM, CTIM, CASM, like it's just all over the place. So I think analysts are kind of confused and don't necessarily know how to categorize things like Nucleus. I think our customers and prospects are probably confused. I'm confused half the time. I'm still trying to figure this stuff out. But all of that said, as I mentioned, we really have a small number of competitors that actually show up and compete with us in deals. And so when I think about our differentiators and why we win, it's generally for a few different reasons. And most of the reasons I would attribute to us having been working on this platform, building this platform and the business and the team for, I guess, 8 years now, coming up on 8 years. Even though the business was started in 2019, as I mentioned, we got started a little bit earlier. So a lot of where we're at now is just purely a result of just time focused on solving this problem. But if I go into some specifics, right, from a feature perspective, I think what you're able to do with Nucleus, with our automation framework, is very unique. It's very flexible and capable of automating some highly complex and unique workflows, right? Every large enterprise has a different perspective on risk management, vulnerability management, different things they want to automate. So we enable that. I would also say our vulnerability intelligence is, I think it's the best there is available. And we did a lot of research about 2 years ago when we partnered with Mandiant to OEM their vulnerability intelligence into our product. So it's not something you pay extra for or anything like that. It's just there. And we spent a lot of time looking at every source of vulnerability intelligence out there. But the idea is we want to overlay all of the vulnerability information we're collecting with the best intel. And so I think that's a big competitive differentiator. Another thing, not necessarily feature related, but that comes to mind is scalability. Because when you think about a platform like Nucleus, what we do from a data and analytics perspective and an automation perspective is pretty. It's kind of simple to do. A lot of it's kind of simple to do for, let's say, thousands of assets and thousands of vulnerabilities, but it's orders of magnitude harder to do for millions, right? Millions of vulnerabilities, sometimes millions of assets. And so when we're in a POV or a POC, and there's a competitor in that deal, the go-to, the playbook is, hey, let's recommend that the client ingest all of their data. We know it's a POV, that's fine. Let's take, however many 400, 500,000 assets they have, all the data they have. And when they take us up, a lot of times they won't take us up on that offer because it's a bigger initiative. But a lot of times they do. And we win pretty much every time in that case because we scale so well. And that's when, like, a lot of the newer companies that just haven't been around long enough and haven't had to process that amount of data, a lot of those products and platforms will just fall over because they weren't, they haven't hit that yet. They haven't hit that point in the business, but we've been around for so long, again, working on this. It turns out to be a competitive advantage.
Yeah, a few things there you said I want to highlight is first off, just the length of focusing on this problem you're talking about. It's been nearly a decade, right, of going after this problem in different environments, federal, environments, highly regulated environments, commercial industry, the integration of the Google or I'm sorry, Mandiant threat intelligence, for example. I just read their report that you talked about, and they pretty much had insight into, I think it was like over a third of the 0 days published in 2023. So they're getting leading edge information around vulnerabilities, exploitation of products and software, which is great to integrate into the product. And I love using the scalability piece as that competitive differentiator, because everyone may go, oh, this works great. And then they go and roll it out, right, the competitor product. And like you said, it just kind of falls over. It's not built for the scale of full production grade, highly complex, large environments. So that's definitely something to keep in mind on as you look at these products. Is like, don't think of it just as a pilot or a subset of data and assets, but your entire enterprise, all the assets, the vulnerability data, and so on that you need to account for when you really try to scale something like this across the organization. So definitely something to highlight.
No doubt, hard problems. And the other thing I would mention, and this is something that just popped into my mind because I've been asking our marketing team to put together a case study, not on the product and the features. We actually have plenty of those, but just on the experience that our customers have working with us, right? Because we end up in replacing competitors pretty frequently, and a lot of it comes down to just kind of failure to launch, right? It's kind of hard to implement an enterprise service like this, and especially when you're growing fast, or if you're a new company, and we had bumps along the way, right? But during our POVs and POCs, you really get a feel for what it's like to partner with us, and you'll talk to our post sales leader to walk you through implementation process. You'll talk to your future CSM or head of product. A lot of times you'll meet with a co-founder and stuff like that. So I really think that there's something there that it's hard to. It's next to impossible to do if you're, again, a newer business, right? If you've only been around for a year or two, those things are really hard to get right. They took us years and years to get that customer experience right and to make it really good. I mean, I would, looking back now, 2, 3, 4 years, some of the customers we had, it's like, I can't believe you guys stayed with us, because it's night and day. At the time, you don't feel like it's that bad. But looking back and how far we've come, just from an experience perspective, I'm trying to get our team just to do a case study on just what it's like to partner with us and work with us.
Yeah, that's actually a great call out, and something, a lot of nuance to it too, like you talked about. I'm a big reader of a Substack called Venture and Security, for folks that know him, Ross Haliliak. And he talks about that customer experience part. And I think many organizations hyperfixate on the features or the functionality, but not the actual user experience or the design of the product or how enjoyable it is to even work with it. Because as you talked about, we're talking about a lot of data, a lot of assets, a lot of vulnerabilities people are trying to deal with. If it's just a pain to use the product or not an enjoyable experience, that can scare people off no matter how feature rich or capable a product is, for example. And then as you talked about, if you're a small startup, you're just fleshing out your go-to-market. You're trying to get features functional and the product at least capable, and you don't have the time or bandwidth or resources to focus on customer experience and have a dedicated customer account manager, or even your leadership team doesn't have the bandwidth to meet with some of the customers and prospects coming in the doors and things like that. So those all can be things that differentiate you all from others. One thing I wanted to get your thoughts on too before we break here at the end is we're seeing a big push for secure by design software and products, of course, which has an emphasis on driving down vulnerabilities, repeated classes of vulnerabilities, things like that. When you look at this push for secure by design and the intersection with vulnerability management, what are your thoughts around that? Do you think we're going in the right direction? Do you think it'll be successful? I'm just curious your perspective, given you've been focused on vulnerability management for so long.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a supporter of it. I mean, I think it's one of CISO does so much, and this is one of several things that they do that probably on its own is not game changing, right? But collectively, all these things really do add up and have a real impact. I think the program today is the pledge is it's a voluntary pledge, right? There's no teeth to it. It's not enforceable, things like that. And we actually signed up for it. I don't think we're listed on the website for some reason, but it's like, look, we're a cybersecurity company. almost everything that they're asking companies to do, we're already doing. And I think if you look at that list of the companies that have pledged, I think most of them are cybersecurity companies, which, it's like, okay, what I love to see is hardware manufacturers signing up. Give me Honeywell, give me Schneider, give me Rockwell, like D-Link and Netgear. I don't care. Like, that's when we start to see those guys show up. There's gonna, I think, definitely have much more of an impact. It's just a matter of kind of getting the word out there, and yeah, I mean that. But yes, absolutely, I think it will have an impact. It's as just about everything that they put out does.
Yeah, one thing you said there that made me laugh is I've been saying the same thing. It's a lot of the kind of the signatories of the pledge are security companies, which is great, right? We are big proponents of secure by design, but we need the broader product market to buy into this. Otherwise, we're kind of in an echo chamber of security practitioners and companies saying, "Oh, we definitely need secure by design," but like we need the broader ecosystem to buy into this. And I think I think it's trending in that direction. It's just it's just a matter of time and carrot stick incentives and so on that'll get us there. But that said, we ran the gamut of the conversation from FedRAMP, your background, starting the product company, some of the differentiators that Nucleus has as a product company and so on. Just looking forward here, as we wrap things up, what are some things on the horizon for you all at the Nucleus security team, and where can folks learn more?
Yeah, so let's see. So we've been a single product company all along since the beginning, right? So one thing that's coming up that we're just really excited about is that we're going to be launching our second product here in the next couple of months, probably right around the time of Black Hat. And I guess I can't really give you much detail other than to say it's more focused on vulnerability intelligence than it is on vulnerability management per se. But I'm really excited because I've been involved in the R&D of this product for over a year now, probably about a year and a half. And it's a very unique product that isn't comparable with anything else in the market, right? It's not going to be something you look at and go, oh yeah, that's like that. No, it's really cool, really new. It's not going to be for everyone, but the people that do need it and want it are gonna love it. Let's see. Outside of that, we've been investing obviously in a lot of government specific functionality since FedRAMP and since the wave of federal interest. We're gonna be launching some features this quarter relating to POAM management and reporting, which I know probably a lot of the audience isn't familiar with, but if you are, you probably cringe when you hear the term POAM because it's such a nightmare. And so some of the functionality you're going to be releasing is going to help a lot for cloud service providers if you're a FedRAMP CSP. And then, of course, government organizations as well that use POAMs. So that's kind of what we have going on and what we have coming up. And as far as reaching me, yeah, if you're interested in anything we talked about today, let's connect on LinkedIn. I love chatting about all this stuff. Hopefully that comes through, and I promise not to try to sell you anything.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you coming on, and you talked about POAM management. I, of course, know that pain very well from my time in the federal space, so I'll be keeping an eye on that, as well as the vulnerability intelligence piece that you talked about coming around Black Hat. And then for folks that want to check out more around Nucleus, you can go to nucleussec.com, nucleussec.com. And Steve and the team are very active on platforms like LinkedIn, putting out a lot of great content, white papers, webinars, etc. So definitely give them a look, and they'll take us out for today. Thanks to everyone who joined us, and thanks, Steve, for coming on.
Thank you, and thanks for listening, folks. Stay safe out there.